Professor Potter.
Here we go.
Professor Potty.
Where's Madison?
By the end of the hour, we will have addressed more issues that led to the secession of the states. We will have attacked 2 more documents as far as your third Blue Book essay is concerned. And I'm giving you today the rubric for paper number 2, because I don't know if you realize this, but that's due a week from Friday. The paper itself is due a week from Friday. And I know some of you are sort of antsy to get going on that. And so I shall reward your antsiness with the complete description of that paper. I suspect most of you can sort of see how it's going to look. Anyway, I'm just giving you the official rubric. Okie dokie.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever heard of this guy?
Red Scott.
No.
I've heard of
I've heard of Nathan Scott.
So no is the answer. He actually lived around here. So the question I have for you is this. So when Wisconsin was a territory, it was part of the Louisiana Purchase, right? Part of it. Let's say a slave owner takes his slave to live around here. Okay, so what theoretically could that slave do? Well, you said escape, Jack, and that's an interesting word.
be free.
Couldn't he just simply inform his master, I'm not your slave?
Yeah.
Why? What is dictating his not slaveness? Sorry? Okay, they're in an area where slavery is illegal. In other words, where he is dictating his status in life, and that's exactly what happened. Dred Scott was a slave whose owner took him to live fairly close to here. I mean, within about an hour radius of here. After that, moved again to Missouri and then died. The slave owner died. Well, this guy, Dred, says, I should be free because my owner took me to live in a region of the nation where slavery was illegal. So he sued him. He sued the owner's family. The owner had died. Okay, and I mean, does he have a point?
Yes.
Does it seem reasonable that he's making an argument here that he should be free?
Yes.
Okay, there's where we are. It goes all the way to the Supreme Court. So I'm just showing you this map. His owner takes him to Wisconsin, a couple other areas, then finally back to slave Missouri, and then dies. And it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, or as I like to call them, you suck, makes a ruling. Now, before I tell you the ruling, I want to know if any of you can predict what the Supreme Court said.
We have no right here. Whatever you want.
Very good. Basically, what she just said is correct. The Supreme Court informed Dred Scott that he was a couch. Any of you have the right to do this. It's weird, but you have the right to do this. Go buy a couch and then stab it to death. And then as the couch is being stabbed to death, they will call 911. And the cops will come out and you'll get arrested. And then there'll be a trial and it'll be a scandal. And then the couch will be called to the stand and will be asked to point out who is trying to stab him. And the couch without hands will just throw a pillow at you and it'll hit you. And the jury will be like, oh no. And then Kool-Aid Man will break in. Oh yeah. And you'll be found guilty. And the judge will say, wait a minute.
You're a couch.
You're a couch. And then everybody will be like, oh, yeah. Sorry. And the owner will be free to go. Do you understand? Or did I lose any of you with that ridiculous story.
He was treated like nothing.
Yes. A slave is property. Property has no rights. A couch is property. Property has no rights. But I want you to think this through. If a slave owner can take his slave and live in a territory where slavery is illegal and nothing happens to this slave owner, what does that mean?
They're not really free unless the slave owner says you can't because of this law.
Very good. In other words, let's just think this through. Let me ask this question then. Based on this idea, what can't the federal government do? Yes, which means what can't the federal government do? That's right. Outlaw slavery. The federal government cannot 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 outlaw slavery. Do you understand that I've just given you two important things that the Supreme Court made in this ruling? Two things they said. Number one, all slaves are property. Property have no rights. And number two, the federal government cannot outlaw slavery.
Can you elaborate? What does that mean?
The federal government cannot outlaw slavery.
So what? I don't know what that means. I don't understand.
Well, in order to understand the impact of this, we have to look at attempts by the federal government to outlaw slavery. What previous attempt at outlawing slavery has the federal government attempted? Give me the name of the agreement. The what? The Missouri Compromise. Remember? They drew a line and they said no slavery would be allowed in territories north of that line. The federal government had previously attempted to outlaw slavery, and now we finally get the Supreme Court to rule on the constitutionality of that compromise, the Missouri Compromise. And the Supreme Court basically said, unconstitutional. The Missouri Compromise was declared unconstitutional. The federal government cannot outlaw slavery, and slaves are property. So what I want you to notice, though, is I said slaves are property, but the Supreme Court actually went further than that. The Supreme Court said blacks are not citizens. All blacks, not just slaves, all blacks. You are not citizens. Only citizens are protected by the Constitution. Blacks are not citizens. Therefore, Mr. Scott, you have no rights. You have no bearing in this courtroom. Later on in this class, we are going to have to identify the thing that overturned this. Does anyone know? What is the document that changed that interpretation, basically established who are citizens? Who are Americans? Before that document, the concept of American citizenship was based on skin color. Indians weren't citizens. And now we know blacks aren't citizens, so you had to be white. You know, today, obviously, that's not true. So what I'm wondering is, does anyone know what was the document that went from this to today's understanding of who is an American citizen? Yes. No. Yes. You're really, really close.
Bill of Rights.
Just throw out numbers. Okay.
It's 13.
Let's just hold off. I will acknowledge Dominic's argument. It was an amendment to the Constitution. Let's go that far. Okay. Stay tuned. Okay. Let's keep going. Dred Scott was property. Property. Think about this. This is true. This is one of your rights. Property cannot be taken away from you without due process. Slaves are property. Property cannot be taken away from you without due process. Therefore, we can't take this slave away from the family that owned him because it violates the Fifth Amendment. Property cannot be taken away from you. Now, any of you in sociology, you know, can the federal government take land away from you in order to build it? Yes, they can. They absolutely can.
They have to pay.
What is it called? Eminent domain. That is correct. Eminent domain. In other words, if it's in the public's good, if it's in the public's interest to take away property from you, then the federal government can. What public good is served by taking away this slave from the owner's family? What public good is served? There is no public good served, said the Supreme Court. So we can't take away your property. I've said this already. Federal government cannot outlaw slavery, which means that the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional. The federal government cannot outlaw slavery. This is a weakening of the federal government. Now, let's see. Let's do one of these bonus things again. Zach, you look like you look like you're ready to either make everyone's life easier or to maintain the status quo. In other words, if Zach gets it wrong, I'm not piling on anything. It's just that if he gets it right, everyone will be awarded five freebie points for the Kias that are due this Friday. Don't help Zach. 18 and 19. Right. Okay, Zach. So allow me to just ask the question. Don't help him. Even if you help him wrongly, it'll be automatically wrong. If anyone says anything to Zach, Zach's the only one. The next word out of your mouth will be the word Hamilton or the word Jefferson.
We believe in you, Zach.
The Supreme Court ruled that the federal government cannot outlaw slavery, and as a result, weakened the federal government. Who would be happy about that?
I know.
The next word out of your mouth is Hamilton or Jefferson. Hamilton is wrong.
I knew it was Jefferson.
Stop it. Don't feel bad.
Logan.
Be friends with him. There was a lot of pressure.
You had a 50-50 chance.
He got it wrong. Hey,
Weaken the
silver
federal-
medal.
weaken-
Silver medal.
Weaken the
You're
federal
still on the
government.
stand.
Weaken the federal government is Jefferson.
Jefferson would be happy. Jefferson was the states' rights guy. Jefferson was the one who said only states are the thing. Hamilton was all federal government. So Jefferson would have been happy about that. Hamilton would have not been happy about that. As important as the ruling was, the reaction, tell me, what region of the country would be angry about this decision? The North would. The North, poo-poo. The South, hooray! Okay. Any questions? Zach, you might get a chance to redeem yourself. I don't. Oh, no, it's all Zach. It's the Zach show today.
Let's go, Zach. Air high.
Any questions? Very good. This is the story of Lincoln before he's elected president. And Lincoln actually is an example of someone who really should inspire us all. I mean, the guy was a total F-up until he finally won the presidency. I mean, one of his sons died when he was very young, like 3 years old. One of his sons died. He opened a business. It closed because it went bankrupt. His partner in the business was an alcoholic who committed suicide. He lost almost every election that he was running for. I mean, he won a couple before finally winning the president, but he generally lost every election. He went and got himself shot. That's not really...
That was after presidency.
Not exactly something you put on your resume, like why I should get this job. Well, I got shot in the head, right? But but he finally wins the presidency. So kind of an inspiration. Before he became a Republican, he was a Whig. That's a political party who, I told you this before, opposed what he felt was a blatantly unjustifiable war, the invasion of Mexico, which would lead to a land grab. The irony was that's exactly what the South accused him of doing during the Civil War. In 1858, he ran for an Illinois Senate seat. In 1858. So 2 years prior to running for president, he's running for a Illinois Senate, and his opponent is a guy by the name of Stephen Douglas. And they're running for the Illinois Senate. Stephen Douglas wins. Lincoln loses. Okay. This is a cool picture because in the middle is young Abraham Lincoln, and to his right, your left, also standing, is Stephen Douglas.
What?
So you're sitting.
Abraham Lincoln, tallest president we've ever had, 6'4".
Is everyone else standing?
No, just Stephen. Stephen was. Okay, I'm lying. But Stephen Douglas was.
He's not actually standing.
He's not standing. I lied.
Lincoln is the only one
But it's pretty cool because in 1858, his opponent is this guy named Stephen Douglas. 2 years later, he would run against that same person for the presidency, which is kind of amazing. And when they were running for the Illinois Senate seat, they engaged in a series of debates. And they're called the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Any of you ever heard of the Lincoln-Douglas debates? They're kind of famous. And at one of these debates in Freeport, Illinois, Douglas issued what he called the Freeport Doctrine, which became a huge deal. Now, before I tell you what the Freeport Doctrine was, will one of you remind me, what is popular sovereignty again?
What everybody else wants.
Whoever wants slavery there, and they outweigh the other.
Very good. Okay, so when the people of a state, the importance here is to distinguish when it was a state. When Nebraska applied for statehood, they could have a vote. And if they voted for slavery, then Nebraska would become a slave state. If they voted for not slavery, it would become a non-slave state. But what Douglas did was he said, well, why don't we allow the people of a territory to have that same right before it's a state? Let's let the territory take a vote. And the people of the territory would get to decide if slavery was legal or not. And Douglas supported that idea. It's popular sovereignty when it was a territory. And Lincoln said, no. The federal government should be able to decide while an area is a territory whether or not slavery should be legal. Okay, Zach, here's your chance.
Oh, here we go.
Did you hear what I said? Were you listening to me? Okay, Douglas supported the idea of popular sovereignty before an area was a state. And Lincoln said, no. Federal government should be able to determine the legality of slavery when it's still a territory. You follow me?
Yeah.
Okay, I will allow you to redeem yourself here. Here we go. The question I have for you is this. Don't help him. What did Lincoln think of the Dred Scott decision? Okay, now, the way you're going to answer this question is you're going to make your thumb point up for I like it or down for I don't like it. I is Lincoln. Go ahead, do this. Okay, now, the next action will be up or down. Go. Don't help him. Don't help him.
I'm not looking at that.
I don't even know what the question is.
Did Lincoln support the Dred Scott decision, the ruling of the Supreme Court? Did he say, awesome, good job, Supreme Court, or you screwed up, Supreme Court? Yeah. Are you sure?
No, because I can get.
Yeah.
Very good. You are right. Okay. Okay, good job. Yeah, of course. He opposes the Dred Scott decision. Look, the Supreme Court is saying the federal government does not have the right to outlaw slavery in a territory, which is exactly what Lincoln proposed. Yes, the federal government should have the right to outlaw slavery in a territory. But Douglas says, no, the people in the territory should be able to determine the legality of slavery in that territory. And it was a big deal. 2 years later, they would run for president. Lincoln said, if elected, I will make sure the federal government outlaws slavery in territories. And Douglas said, if elected, I'll let you decide. I'll let the people decide on their own. And we know Lincoln was elected. Okay. Any questions here? Let's keep going. Last slide for today. We've met John Brown before. Does anyone remember where? Where were we? Go ahead.
Why is Canada an ocean?
Canada's not an ocean. This is a weird map. Okay. Where we met John Brown? We met him.
Yeah, the rain.
You did. We don't recall? Go ahead.
Wasn't he the one who like murdered people?
Yes. Okay.
Wasn't he the slave that like ran?
He's not a slave.
No, okay. No.
John Brown's a white man. He is a hardcore abolitionist. Fervently, religiously abolitionist. No. Okay, very good. He was in Kansas. He's the guy that moved to Kansas and killed 7-ish slave owners because slavery is wrong in that time period known as Bleeding Kansas, right? Period when Kansas was trying to decide whether or not to have slavery, so they had a vote. Both sides claimed they won, and so this guy engaged in the murder of slave owners. That's how hardcore he is. I mean, he's willing to move his family to Kansas and not only vote, but kill people who voted the other way. Okay, well, here's his next plan. He decides to move his family to Virginia, to a place called Harper's Ferry, which is a town. Harper's Ferry. You know, back when I was in high school, the Faribault Falcons, that was our mascot. We were the Falcons. But before Falcons, they were the Faribault Fairies, which didn't exactly strike fear into our opponents, right? Oh no, here come the fairies, right? This is a different reference to the word ferry, though. This is a boat. Harper's Ferry was a boat, a ferry. It's just a boat. That's true. Okay. So here's his plan. He's going to sneak into a federal warehouse full of guns in Virginia. He's going to steal the guns. He is then going to travel through the countryside of Virginia, meet any slave, give them the weapon, train them on how to use the weapon, and start a slave insurrection.
What happened after he stole the guns?
He didn't steal the guns.
He said this is
His plan.
This is his plan.
Okay, his plan, whatever.
Is to sneak into a federal warehouse full of guns, steal the guns, travel through the countryside of Virginia, give every slave he runs into a gun, create a slave army, and overthrow the state of Virginia. And he had followers who were part of the plan. He's the only one that made it out of the warehouse alive, right? They snuck into the warehouse. He and his followers snuck into the warehouse. It was something like 15-ish people. People noticed that there was somebody inside this warehouse, and it didn't seem like they were supposed to be, so they notified the authorities. Pretty soon, the U.S. Army has surrounded the warehouse and shot and killed everybody except John Brown, who they were ordered to not kill, get him alive. So they did. They got him alive. Okay. And he was captured. He was then put on trial. Found guilty. And executed. He was executed by hanging. Okay. some interesting things about it. Would anyone happen to know the commanding officer of the military unit that captured him? This is amazing. It's one of these things is like, come on, that can't be right. No, George was dead.
That's why I can't be right.
Robert E. Lee.
That's why it's amazing, isn't it?
Robert E. Lee,
Oh my goodness.
which is amazing because a little while later, Robert E. Lee would become the commanding officer of the military fighting the army. And here he is protecting the army, protecting the United States from this rogue. A few years later, he's the rogue. He's the traitor. Okay, which is pretty cool. So John Brown's executed. The importance is, how did people react to him? The execution. How do you think Northerners saw John Brown? Good. Hero, right? He Rosa'd. Now, Rosa hasn't existed yet, but that's the idea. Did he break the law? Yep, but so did Rosa. But Rosa was justified, so is John Brown. What's that called? When you break a law, civil disobedience.
Okay,
Very
that's
good. He engaged in civil disobedience, justifiable in his actions. Okay, that's just fine. Throughout American history, we can connect the dots. People who broke the law but felt justified in doing so. We can go back to the Sons of Liberty dumping that tea in that harbor. Illegal. But people viewed them as heroic. Others viewed them as criminals. John Brown, some people viewed him as heroic, others as criminals. Osama bin Laden, some people viewed what he did as heroic and others as criminal. The South viewed him as a criminal. And here's where the South continues to build its case. You Northerners are the ones breaking the law. You ignore the fugitive slave law, which requires that Northerners return runaway slaves. You guys are ignoring it. You guys have this guy who's sneaking into a federal warehouse, and you guys praise him like he's some hero. You're the ones breaking the law. We're not breaking the law. Why would we be part of a nation that feels justified in breaking the law? Now, do they have a point? Maybe they do. Maybe they have a point. Any questions?
What's the reaction of the North?
Reaction of the North was, hooray, what a hero. Reaction of the South, what do you mean he's a hero? The guy broke the law. He's a criminal. Criminals break the law. He's a criminal. Why are you praising this guy? How can we be part of this nation? Okay. Very good. Let's rock.
And roll.
Let's attack. 2 documents. Documents. We are on document 6.
I don't even remember what document it was.
6. We're skipping 5.
I was like, let's attack. and like John Brown.
I don't find history books funny.
Me either. I was really big.
Me too.
Really?
You got 4 wrong.
Or do you think it's from him?
What'd you say?
Who had document 6?
There we go.
Zach, here's your chance to shine again. Right now, they are at 5 free points.
Make it 10.
No,
If you get it right, they'll still get the 5 free points. But if you get it wrong, I'm taking it away.
Hey.
I thought that would work. You're not the real Santa. Well, if you're the real Santa, what song did I sing to you on your birthday?
Happy birthday song.
Okay. Zach, I still want to ask you this question.
Well, happy birthday, of course.
Is document 6 a primary or secondary document?
Why do I have this out? Oh my god. I'm so
Hunter, you should have been an elf. Like if they did a production of it, like you'd be a good elf.
I
Are
know.
we on document 5?
No, skipping document 5. Primary, secondary. Why do you say so?
Another 5 free points.
No, so you can see it's definitely secondary. It was written in 1970 by a historian by the name of W.E.B. Du Bois. Well, from Black Reconstruction America in 1970. Okay.
This is still talking about failure.
So here's this black, prominent African-American historian, W.E.B. Du Bois. We're going to talk about this guy in a bit. I want you to skip to the very last sentence. In order to earn a living, the American Negro was compelled to give up his political power. Does that sound like a reason Reconstruction succeeded or failed? Clearly failed. Why? Let's just pause. Could some of you who are somewhere else right now come back? Are you back? So are you back now? Okay, good. So why is document 6 an argument that Reconstruction failed? This is one of these Captain Obvious questions. Go ahead. Do anything what? Politically. What does that mean?
Who's that?
What do you mean political? Vote! That's it! That's it! Document 6 argues that Reconstruction failed because blacks lost the right to vote. Now, wait a minute. I'm confused. When did they have the right to vote? Weren't they slaves? Okay, so that means in order to understand what's going on with document 6, we're going to have to do a little bit of a historical investigation, which we will do in class, which what I'm going to try and point out to you is that blacks went through a quick phase of slaves, political juggernauts running the show to they lost it somehow. That's what this document is saying, that blacks lost what they had for a moment. They had it. They had the right to vote. There were blacks elected as senators, mayors. I mean, right after the Civil War. Former slaves had it. And then something happened, and they lost it. And that something happened was, well, I'll give you some clues. They rode at night, and they wore white, and they burned things, and they scared blacks from voting. Okay, so you understand. So document 6 is arguing Reconstruction failed because blacks lost the right to vote. There you go. One more quick one, and then we're going to shift gears here. Who had document 7? Someone had document 7. Who had document 7? Did no one have document 7? Oh. Did I not assign document 7?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh, we skipped a couple.
Yeah.
No, did we skip number 7?
No, we didn't skip 7. All right, that's all right. Let's just figure it out as a group. This is from a folk history of slavery, 1945, so it is a secondary source, not that that matters. The person speaking here is a former slave, and he's being interviewed. So after the Civil War, the federal government did this, which is kind of amazing. They interviewed former slaves. They wanted their experiences on record. Later on in this class, we're going to study the Holocaust. And one of the things that happened fairly recently, actually, 1990-ish, is that this guy by the name of Steven Spielberg, probably heard of him. He directed E.T. He made a movie called Schindler's List. Great movie. How many of you have seen it? Oh, my God. You got to watch that movie. Great movie. Anyway, what he realized after making that movie is that these people are dying. The people that experienced the Holocaust, they're dying. And so he interviewed and recorded as many people that actually went through it as possible. Living history. That's what the federal government did with these former slaves. So they interviewed this guy named, what's his name? Oh, shoot. No, Marsh John was the master.
John
McCoy, yep. Okay. So the slave's name was John McCoy, right? So here's what he says. After, he's not a slave anymore. So the guy comes up to him and says, so, what do you think? And he says, freedom, one no different I knows of. I works for Marsh John. Marsh means master. I works for Marsh John, just the same for a long time. He say one morning, John, you can go out in the field if and you wants to, or you can get out if and you wants to, because the government says you's free. If you wants to work, I'll feed you and give you clothes, but can't pay you no money. I ain't got none. Huh. I didn't know nothing what money was, no how, but I knows I get plenty of victuals to eat. Victuals is food. So I stays. Okay? So think of John. Before slavery's ended, he lives in that house. He works in that field for that guy. Now, slavery's over. Where does he live?
That house.
That house. Where does he work? That field. And who's the one that he works for? That guy. Nothing changed
He's just not getting.
economically. This is an economic argument that Reconstruction failed because Reconstruction supposedly ended slavery. And this guy says, freedom ain't nothing I knows of.
That's not slavery. He had the choice to leave.
Okay, you can argue against it if you want, but this is a document that argues that economically speaking, nothing changed. They lived in the same house doing the same thing for the same people.
This document just says that the whole Civil War was just 20.
Yes. Now, starting tomorrow, we're going to look at a whole new set of documents, starting with documents 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15,
Are you serious?
10, 11, 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh, I guess that's it. 10, 11, and 12, and 13. 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. There's 5 more documents.
What happened to 8?
Document 8 we're skipping. Okay.
Where's 9?
That argue Reconstruction was successful. Okay.
It's right there.
At your table, decide which one of you is going to attack which one of the documents. If you are at a table of less than 5, that's okay. Just pick 3. That table, pick 3.
This is a lot.
Tyler, pick anyone you want.
No. Let's just document 12.
Decide which documents you're going to have analyzed for
Take
tomorrow.
11.
Go.
Can I get the long one?
You and Stevie got the long one.
What one's the long one?
9 or 10?
I'll take 9. I got 13.
I got 12.
I mean, I could do 10.
Who's that?
I don't know how this eraser works.
Guys,
It's supposed to be super long.
look. This is the paper.
It's the paper.
It's for the paper. It's the 8 paragraphs.
How'd you
that
do
the paper
that?
should
I've
look
been
like.
pulling it out. I think I broke it. You are actually a genius, though. Okay, what numbers?
Who has document 12? That's not fair.
I told you. He's like, if you have 5 in your group, you all just choose. I was like, 12. Mine.
13.
Awkward.
I'd rather actually do document 9.
Well, one of us has to.
You'd rather do 9?
What one do
The
you
next
have?
one in order.
You had 11?
Oh, that's too fine a print.
Okay. So let me go over this. It's pretty important that you follow along. Don't be overwhelmed. It's either column 1 or column 2, not both. You have to decide. Do you agree with Genovese or do you agree with Stamp?
That's the job.
Can you give us both their arguments again?
Okay. So if you disagree with Genovese, agree with Stamp, you're column 1. If you disagree with Stamp, agree with Genovese, you're column 2. So let me remind you, Genovese believed that culture and economic incentive and fear of punishment all motivated slaves to work hard. Stamp says, I buy the economic argument, but I don't believe they worked hard because they feared punishment. Too much evidence that they ran away, openly resisted, et cetera, et cetera. And I also don't believe it was in African DNA to work hard. Too many examples of laziness, whether it was intentional or not, but there's too many examples of slaves not working hard to suggest that it was just part of who they were. Well, which one do you buy? That leads you to column 1 or column 2. Column 1 is you're going with Stamp. Column 2 is you're going with Genovese.
What document am I doing?
Okay?
11.
Doesn't really matter which one. There isn't a right answer and a wrong answer here. It's whatever argument you think is the more persuasive.
Where'd you get that?
You can then look and see that you are going to be writing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraph paper. 7 paragraphs. Each paragraph gets its very own Roman numeral.
I don't know how to read.
7. You'll understand.
Is there no conclusion?
Just hold on. Okay. Let's just look at these a paragraph at a time. Whether you're in column 1 or column 2, the first paragraph is your typical first paragraph. You need that hook, whatever that hook is for you. And then you need the roadmap. So the first thing you can do in the roadmap is acknowledge that both historians agree that economic incentive was a motivation, right? That's true with both. What you then do is you take one of the historians and point out that historian's view. So in column 1, Genovese believes slaves' desire to be part of a community motivated them to work hard. Genovese believes that slaves worked hard to avoid punishment. Stamp does not think contributing to the success of the community motivated slaves, and Stamp does not think slaves worked hard to avoid punishment, or the other way around. In column 2, I mean, the views are the same. You're just, what's the order? Stamp, I'm now looking at column 2. Stamp does not think contributing to the success of the slave community motivated slaves, and he also does not think slaves worked hard to avoid punishment. Okay, then you just point out the views of the other one. And then you write your thesis, which is where you render judgment for the first time. I don't know your opinion about which historian you agree with until your thesis. That's when you render judgment. Why'd your hand in the air? Yes, I know. What is the question? Where are you looking?
Paragraph 3 and paragraph 5 both start with community, but there's different because one's like bringing in Genovese, the other one doesn't have Genovese at all in it.
There's doubles of all of them, except for economic incentive because they both agree.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's why.
Hold on. Yeah. Okay, you're right. Yeah, it should be 6:30. Okay, so let's just look at, very good. Then let's just look at column 1. And just keep in mind that if you're doing the second column, it's just the same thing, only the other way. In paragraph 2 of either paper, you're pointing out that both agree that economic worked, right? So look, it says paragraph 2, both agree with each other that economic incentive was a factor. You need in that paragraph document evidence for Genovese and document evidence for Stamp. And then you need one piece of historical evidence to prove both. You're saying the same thing. Why do you need 2 separate pieces of historical evidence to support a conclusion that both agreed with? You don't. So in that paragraph, you need 2 pieces of historic document evidence and 1 piece of historical evidence. Okay, and then you, of course, analyze it. Follow me so far? All right. In paragraph 3, then, I'm looking at the first column. You'll have a topic sentence, a claim, right? And then it says document evidence from Genovese. If you're in column 1, do you agree with Genovese or disagree with Genovese? You disagree with them. So you will then look. I'm looking at column 1, topic sentence, document evidence from Genovese, historical evidence seeming to support Genovese, and then you analyze it, and then you refute it with historical evidence. You do not mention Stamp. You refute Genovese with historical evidence. If you're confused, it's the same as your Blue Book essays. There's no difference.
Isn't it?
It's the same. What? Yeah, you do directly quote in these. Yep.
Which one did I say?
The right.
I'm still in column 1. I'm now looking at paragraph 4. you're avoiding punishment, you say, here's what Genovese thinks. You provide
I don't understand either.
document evidence from Genovese, historical evidence seeming to support Genovese, and then you refute it with historical evidence. No mention of stamp. Oh, wait a minute, I did do it right. I did do this right. Okay. There's a reason sense of community is on there twice. Okay? Because you got to prove Stamp's view of sense of community. Okay. So here's the basic idea. You're going to have an intro, then you're going to have a paragraph, one paragraph for both Stamp and Genovese about economic incentive. Now, this is if you disagree with Genovese. You will then present Genovese's view of culture, which you don't buy. You will then present Genovese's view of punishment, which you don't buy. You will then present Stamp's view of culture, which you buy. And Stamp's view of avoiding punishment, which you buy. And then conclusion, 7. You want me to go through that again?
I don't know.
Intro. Paragraph about economic incentive from both, with one piece of historical evidence. Genovese's view of culture, which you do not buy. Genovese's view of avoiding punishment, which you do not buy. Stamp's view of culture, which you buy. Stamp's view of avoiding punishment, which you buy. Conclusion, 7.
Okay.
Don't be intimidated. It's exactly the same as your Blue Book essay with one additional paragraph. The additional paragraph where they both agree economic incentive worked. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. Exactly the same. Yes. No. Just make sure you have each piece. And then paragraph 7 is your conclusion.
If you get this done, or did you do it yourself?
If you're going with column number 2, that means you do not agree with Stamp. You buy Genovese. Intro. Paragraph where they both argue economic incentive worked. That's 2 quotes, 1 piece of historical evidence. Paragraph about Stamp's view of culture, which you do not buy. Paragraph about Stamp's view of avoiding punishment, which you do not buy. Genovese's view of culture, which you buy. Genovese's view of avoiding punishment, which you buy. Conclusion, 7. 7. I expect each of you to apologize individually for suggesting that I did this incorrectly, but I didn't. And I even thought I did for a second. Darn you. I did it right.
But it's so confusing to look at. I wish there was colors.
Don't be overwhelmed. It's a Blue Book essay with 1 additional paragraph and actual quotes. You don't ready to You actually directly quote. You directly quote in papers.
Oh, yeah. This yelling is made me tired.
Yes.
So we don't need to find
What do I need for historical?
You wondered why you were.
Okay, so she just asked, hey, do we have to find outside historical evidence? No.
1, 2,
You've got plenty in your documents themselves. Now, if you want to, great. Great.
1,
So what are these documents for?
Okay, so I was just about to address that. It does say at the very, very bottom, you got to synthesize once. Synthesize one time. Go anywhere. There's something else I have to tell you, it's what's on the back, but before I move on, do you get it?
You need 7 historical examples total. One.
Just count how much it says historical evidence.
Just follow each numerical number. Just do that, and then do that, and then do that. Just start at the top, work your way down.
This paper.
Yes. 4, 5, 6, 7.
I have one more thing to tell you,
No.
but before I move on, do you understand this?
Yes.
It's not even looking.
I want you to look at the back, but not yet. Hey, this is due a week from Friday.
Yay.
typed, submitted on Google Classroom, or
That's the
emailed to
day
me,
before break.
or a physical printout, and then enjoy your Christmas break without worrying about it. That's the reason I did it.
You just have to worry about the blue essay the next week.
Not the next week.
I
The
thought
next
you-
week.
Oh,
Not the week you get back.
Okay.
The next week.
sounds good. Okay, that makes me happy.
Okay, now look at the back.
What about it?
What is the back?
The back is much easier than you think. Okay. Remember that this class is not only a history class, it is a historiography class. Yes, we study history, but we also the study of history. There is a reason we look at Zinn's interpretation versus Schweikart and Ellen's interpretation. There's a reason we look at Genevieve's interpretation versus Stamp's interpretation.
Are these vocab words?
Pick which one of these looks like
Interesting.
the school of thought from the historian that you agree with. Put the historian you agree with. Right now I'm looking at Roman numeral 7 conclusion. And the part that you always have to do, which some of you are really good at and some of you need work with, and that is contextualization throughout history. And then you know, in your conclusion, you write that bad boy.
Yeah.
This is a historiography paper. You need to provide me with a bit of contextualization. What type of historian is your champion historian? Which one of these apply? And then just an explanation, well, why? Why do you think so? Is the historian a comparative historian? A comparative historian looks at competing societies all the time. Does that seem to fit?
Right.
Or is he a deconstructionist?
Oh, yeah.
A deconstructionist tries to find holes in history, finds holes in them. Is your historian a deconstructionist? There's no right or wrong answer here. As long as you have a sentence saying what he is and another sentence explaining, well, why do you think so?
Okay.
Good.
So we
This
can't go
is
wrong.
required by the University of Minnesota. I have to require you to do this. Otherwise, I wouldn't. But I have to.
Contextualization.
So we can't be wrong.
Well, if your explanation is awful,
Well,
that's wrong.
but if it's like a good explanation,
Yeah.
we
Just
can't
sit
be
here
wrong.
for a second.
Pick one, whichever one you think, yeah, it kind of sounds like that, and make your champion historian that.
I mean,
I
Gene-
don't know.
Genovese
So these are
is
the
a
different types of
diplomatic
historians?
historian.
So what is
Genovese.
history? Can we just
He
like
focuses on the great men who
Historian?
accomplished that. He talks about how the blacks accomplished things in order to.
We'll revisit
avoid
this tomorrow.
Jeez.
That was an
Yes,
adventure.
Potter.
focus on the
Or
motivations of any group?